The morning Edna Whitfield was sold for the price of a winter coat. The sky was the color of ash, and nobody in Coldwater Creek thought twice about it. She was 22 years old. She had brown hair the color of creek mud and hands that had been rough since she was 9. She didn't cry when her uncle pressed her arm across the counter of Hargrove's general store and told the man on the other side of it that she'd cook, clean, and keep quiet. She didn't cry because she had learned a long time ago that crying only made the bruises worse. The man who bought her wasn't looking to buy anything that morning. His name was Cade Merritt. He'd come down from the ridge for flour, salt, and maybe a new blade for his skinning knife if Hargrove had one worth buying. He was 34, wide across the shoulders, and he spoke to people the way a man speaks when he's spent most of his life alone, carefully, like words cost something. He heard the uncle before he saw Edna, heard the voice first, that particular tone men use when they are selling something they don't value. She's able-bodied, quiet, won't cause you trouble. Cade came around the shelf of dry goods and stopped. Edna was standing with her wrists held together at the small of her back, not because anyone had tied them, but because she'd learned that posture a long time ago. Smaller, take up less space, give them nothing to grab. Her uncle's hand was on her shoulder in the way a man keeps his hand on a horse he's trying to move off a fence post. The man across the counter, a rancher named Dolph Keene, who smelled like sour mash before noon, was squinting at her the way you'd look at livestock. $17, Keene said. She's worth 22, the uncle said. Cade set down his flour. He didn't know why he did it. He would think about that for a long time afterward, lying awake in the dark of his cabin with the wind coming under the door, and he still wouldn't have a clean answer. He wasn't a man given to impulse. He wasn't soft. He'd buried a wife and a son in the same winter 6 years ago, and he'd kept going, which meant he'd made a kind of peace with the world being a hard place. But something about the way the girl was standing, that specific stillness, that practice disappearing, hit him somewhere behind the sternum. He reached into his coat. "I'll give you 20, he said. Both men turned to look at him. Edna did not look up. "This ain't your business, Merritt," the uncle said. $20. Cade said again, flat. "In your hand right now." The uncle looked at Keene. Keene looked at the money. Then Keene stepped back because $20 was more than 17, and the uncle had been hoping to get drinking money before the end of the week anyway. The bills changed hands. Cade picked up his flour. "Come on," he said to Edna, and walked toward the door. She followed, not because she wanted to, not because she trusted him. She followed because she had nowhere else to go, and because the alternative was standing in the middle of Hargrove's general store until someone else decided what to do with her. Outside, the wind cut down off the ridge and Edna pulled her shawl tighter. It was a thin shawl, more holes than wool. Cade loaded his sacks into the back of the wagon and climbed up onto the seat. He didn't look at her. She stood in the mud beside the wheel. "You getting up?" he said. She climbed up. They rode out of Coldwater Creek without speaking. The road back to the ridge was rutted and steep, and the horse knew the way better than either of them felt like directing it. Pine trees closed in on both sides. The sky lowered. Somewhere up in the gray, a hawk was making wide circles over nothing in particular. After maybe 20 minutes, Edna said, without looking at him, "What do you want me to do?" It wasn't a question. It had the sound of something she'd said before, a line spoken before the real conversation started, the one that told her what she was actually dealing with. Cade kept his eyes on the road. "I want you to not fall off the wagon." She said nothing. "There's a cot in the back room," he said. "It's got a blanket. If the blanket isn't enough, I've got another one somewhere. There's food. You can have whatever you want from the larder." He paused. "I'm not going to do anything to you." She turned her head and looked at him for the first time. He was watching the horse. His jaw was set and his hands on the reins were steady. "Why did you buy me?" she said. He thought about it for a moment. "Keene would have been worse," he said. That was all he said. And somehow, she didn't know why, wouldn't be able to explain it later. That specific answer, that plain and unglamorous answer, made something loosen very slightly in her chest. Not trust. She didn't have trust to give, but something adjacent to it, some tiny, fragile willingness to wait and see. The cabin sat back against the tree line at the top of a long slope. It was a serious cabin. Not the kind men built for a season and abandon. Cade had built it with the idea of permanence, before permanence had stopped meaning what he thought it meant. There was a woodshed, a root cellar, a small barn, a kitchen garden that had gone ragged at the edges from a season of half-attention. Inside it smelled like wood smoke and pine resin and something that might have been coffee from that morning. Edna stood in the middle of the front room and looked around like she was calculating exits. Cade put the flower away and then stood at the window looking out at the yard. "The cot is through there," he said. He didn't point. He didn't move toward her. She went to look. The back room was small. There was a cot, a wool blanket folded at the foot, a hook on the wall, and a small window that let in cold light. It was the cleanest room she'd slept in since she was a child. She came back out. "Do you have rules?" she said. He turned from the window. "What? Rules? Things you want. Things I'm not supposed to do." She said it with the practiced blankness of someone reading from a list. "Tell me now so I don't make mistakes." He looked at her for a long moment. "Don't go through my things," he said. "Don't go past the south tree line alone. There's a drop-off and it's not marked. Don't let the fire go out at night if the temperature drops." She waited. "That's it," he said. Something moved across her face, too fast to name. She looked back down at the floor. "All right," she said. The first week was a study in distance. Cade went about his days and gave her room to go about hers. He was up before light. She could hear him moving in the kitchen, the low thud of the stove door, the particular hiss of water before it boiled. He didn't wake her. He left food. She found a rhythm slowly. There were things to do, and she did them not because he told her to, but because doing things kept her from thinking too much. She cleared the kitchen garden of the dead growth and turned the soil, even though it was late in the season. She mended 2 of the coats hanging by the door. She found a broom and swept the front room without being asked. Cade noticed. He didn't say much about it. He came in from the barn one evening and saw the swept floor and the neatly folded coats, and he stood there for a moment with his hat in his hand, and then he said, "You didn't have to do all that." "I know," Edna said from the kitchen. She was making biscuits. She wasn't sure why she'd started making biscuits. She'd just found the lard and the flour, and her hands had known what to do. "Thank you," he said. She stopped what she was doing. She couldn't remember the last time someone had thanked her for something. Not for work, not for the ordinary daily labor of keeping a household from falling apart. It was such a small thing, and it sat in the room between them like something unexpectedly heavy. "You don't have to thank me," she said. "It's just work." "Still," he said, and went to wash his hands. She turned back to the biscuits. Her eyes were dry. She made sure of that. The question she asked him, the one that would stay with him, that he would turn over in his mind for the rest of that winter, came on a Thursday during the second week. He had raised his voice, not at her, at the horse, who had gotten a shoe caught in the fence rail and panicked. Cade had come out of the barn shouting, "Whoa, whoa, damn it, hold still." And by the time she reached the fence, he'd gotten the horse calmed down and was running his hands down its leg, checking for damage. She had come running at the sound. She stopped at the fence and watched him work. The horse's breathing slowed. Cade straightened up and exhaled and rubbed the back of his neck. Then he noticed Edna standing perfectly still with her eyes on the ground. "You all right?" he said. She was quiet for a moment, then, "Are you going to hit with a closed hand or an open one?" The words landed on him like cold water. He didn't speak right away. He made himself not react too fast, because he could see how tight she was holding herself. That braced stillness, the slight lean away from him, the hands already half raised. "Edna," he said very quietly, "look at me." She looked up. Her eyes were dry. She'd made sure of that too. "I wasn't shouting at you," he said. "I was shouting at the horse." She said nothing. "I'm not going to hit you," he said. "Not with a closed hand, not with an open one. Not at all, not ever." Something crossed her face that he couldn't fully read, not relief, not exactly. Something more careful than relief. Something that had been taught to be careful about relief, because relief sometimes came right before something worse. "My uncle used an open hand," she said. "He said it hurt more." Cade was quiet for a moment. "Your uncle was wrong about a lot of things," he said. She looked back down at the fence rail and put her hand on the wood, steadying herself, or steadying the fence, or just needing something to touch. "I'll finish the water buckets," she said, and walked back toward the barn. He stood at the fence with the horse for a long time after she left. He had grown up in a family that didn't talk much. His father had been a man who expressed love by getting up before dawn and working until after dark and making sure there was food. That was the language he knew of. He didn't know how to say to a woman he barely knew that the fact that she was bracing for a blow had broken something open in him that he hadn't known was still closed. So he said it the only way he knew. He went into town 3 days later and he came back with a dress. Not a fancy one, a practical one, dark blue wool, the kind that would last. He set it on the kitchen table without ceremony and went to the barn. When he came in for supper, she was wearing it. She didn't say anything about it, neither did he, but she did put an extra biscuit on his plate. November came down hard from the mountains. The temperature dropped fast and the snow came early, which meant longer nights, and the two of them spending more time inside the same four walls than either of them had been accustomed to. They were careful with each other. Careful the way people are when they have decided, without discussing it, that they don't want to damage whatever it is they're building. Cade told her, one evening, about his wife. Her name had been Luella. She'd come from Virginia, and she'd hated the winters but never said so, only pulled her shawl tighter and kept going. He told her about their son, Thomas, who had lived for 3 days and not a day more of. He told her that after that winter he had come up to the ridge and built the cabin with the idea of removing himself from the general business of the world. He'd told her this looking at the fire. She hadn't said anything while he was talking. When he was done, she was quiet for another long moment, and then she said, "I'm sorry about Thomas." Just that. He looked at her. "Thank you," he said. She told him, over several evenings, about herself, not all at once, in small pieces, the way you let something out slowly when you've been holding it too long. Her mother had died when she was 12. Her father had followed 2 years later, drunk and stupid in a river. Her uncle had taken her in the way a man takes in something he can find a use for. She'd been cooking and cleaning and keeping his house since she was 14. She'd tried to leave twice. The second time he'd found her in the next town over and brought her back. She told this without drama. Just the plain facts of it, the way you'd describe a series of bad winters. But Cade heard everything she wasn't saying. The 8 years of smallness, the practice disappearing, the hands folded at the small of her back. "You're not going back there," he said. "I know," she said, and then quieter, "I didn't think anyone was ever going to say that." December was almost peaceful. She learned what he liked. Coffee strong, biscuits plain, the fire banked low at night. He learned what she needed, to not be spoken to right when she woke up, to have her work acknowledged, to be warned before a door was opened from the other side. He caught himself watching her from the barn doorway sometimes, the way she moved through the kitchen garden even in the cold, taking inventory of what might still be saved. She had a precise economy of movement, nothing wasted, every action deliberate. It was the movement of someone who had learned to be efficient because no one was going to help her. He admired it. He also understood with a clarity that arrived slowly and all at once that he didn't just want her to have a roof. He wanted her to have more than survival. He didn't say that, he said. "The fence on the south pasture needs another rail. I was thinking of adding a gate. What do you think?" She looked up from the pot she was stirring. "A gate would be good," she said, "for when the snow gets deep, so you don't have to lift it." "That's what I thought," he said. She went back to stirring. He went to get the tools. This was how they spoke, obliquely, carefully, in the language of practical things. Her uncle arrived on a Thursday morning in the last week of December. Edna was alone in the cabin when she heard the horse. She went to the window and looked out, and the blood left her face. He was riding up the slope slow and deliberate, the way he did everything, not in a hurry because he'd never had to be. He was a large man, her uncle, broad and red-faced, and he had a way of taking up more space than he needed. She didn't scream. She didn't hide. She went to the fireplace and picked up the iron poker and stood by the door. Heard his boots on the step. The door opened. He saw her first, then the poker. He smiled. The smile that meant he found something amusing that she wasn't going to find amusing. "There she is," he said. "Come on, Edna. Don't make this foolish. Get off this property," she said. "You're my niece. You're my responsibility." He stepped inside. The man who bought you has no legal claim. We both know that. Get out, she said. He kept walking toward her. The door behind him opened. Cade stepped in from the yard with a rifle and a look on his face that was not angry. It was something more deliberate than anger, something that had thought itself through. She told you to get out, he said. Her uncle turned slowly. This is family business, Merritt. She's not your family, Cade said. She's a woman who's been in my house for 2 months and hasn't done a single thing to deserve what you put her through. And you're standing in my doorway. He didn't raise the rifle. He didn't need to. I'll say it once more. Get out. Her uncle looked at her. He looked at Cade. He looked at Edna's hands around the poker, and something in his face recalculated. He left. She didn't watch him right away. She listened to the hoofbeats until they were gone, and then she set the poker down and sat in the nearest chair and put her face in her hands. Not crying, just still. Just the particular kind of still that comes after something you've been braced for finally passes. Cade leaned the rifle by the door. He sat down in the chair across from her. He didn't say anything for a while. Then, he won't come back. She looked up. How do you know? She said. Because I know men like that, Cade said. They want what's easy. You're not easy anymore. She looked at him. There was something she wanted to say. She had been turning it over for weeks, the shape of it, the weight of it, never quite sure how to hold it without dropping it. I don't know how to do this, she said. Do what? This. She gestured vaguely at the room, the fireplace, the ordinary evening they'd been having before her uncle arrived. Just live somewhere, without waiting for it to end. Cade was quiet for a moment. I don't know either, he said. I've been trying to figure that out for 6 years. She looked at the fire. He looked at the fire. Maybe we could figure it out at the same time, she said, not looking at him when she said it, watching the flames. He didn't answer right away. She felt the silence, and in that silence she felt the old reflex, the one that said she'd said too much, she'd taken up too much space, she should pull back. But then he said, I think that sounds reasonable. And she looked at him. And there was nothing practiced in his face, no performance of kindness. Just a man sitting by a fire in the middle of winter who had been alone for 6 years and was only now beginning to understand that alone and solitary were 2 different things, and that he'd been choosing one when the other one had been available. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. The fire cracked and settled, and outside the snow came down steady and silent over the ridge, over the yard, over the fence with the gate he was going to build in the spring, and for the first time in longer than Edna could remember, she did not calculate her exits before she closed her eyes.